saints. We're alive. It's good to be alive in these times of trouble. I'm Black Light, Elder Black Light. We're in the lakes, the Great Lakes. Elder Black Light in the Great Lakes, trying to give you the kind of knowledge that you won't learn in college. We're coming right to it because time is coming short. We're in the days of Armageddon. According to the Doomsday Clock, we're seconds away. But 8 seconds in the Doomsday Clock is Allah's time because he's master of the day of judgment. And there's no shame in my game. And I'm down for my crown. I studied the movements of Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad and his messenger, the greatest messenger of all times. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They influenced me. And I'm testifying on how my life changed. I was born in 1946, July the 28th. And next month, July 28th, I'll be 78, 2 years away from turning 80. I haven't been in a doctor's office or a hospital since 1981. That should be hitting on 40 years ago. I eat one time a day. Sometimes I eat 2 times a day. I seldom go without eating 3 times a day, but I have done it before. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't snort coke. I don't chase after women. My wife, may peace and blessings be upon her, passed away 2 years ago. I'm a widow. The women, Black women, have the mind of the 85 percenters, deaf, dumb, and blind. not only here in America, but abroad. I try to, Islam is my nature. I just discovered what that really means. They say Islam means peace, but it goes a little deeper than uh, peace. I'm calling this the Doomsday Chronicle. We're going to try to, from this point on, in 2024, we're going to put things in order leading up to uh, the elections, if there be any elections. And we're going to talk about Detroit. I left off yesterday talking about Detroit and how important it is. We're going to study in depth on Detroit. Now, I'm a type of brother that don't take comments. Now, they cut me off. I just got on this month back on my channel doing videos live. They cut me off YouTube community saying I was teaching hate teachings. So that lets you know that I struck a nerve somewhere. Because if you think I'm teaching hate, don't let your children watch me. I already put my videos are not for children. And you don't have to watch. So you don't have to get offended. You know, they show porno movies on television, on various types of formats. They show rated X, rated movies. They come on. You don't have to watch them. If they offend thee, turn it off. But yet and still, I remember a time when you had to go to a special theater. They had pornographic bookstores where they would show rated X movies, and then they had uh, a rated X theater. If you don't want to watch it, you have to go there and spend your money. You know, they got a movie called The Birth of a Nation, where they teaching hate. The movie is not banned. Did they ban that movie? No. You can get it right now on YouTube. See, they think all black people have the mind of an adolescent. of a juvenile. But the way I was taught by Master Farad Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, messenger of Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, I taught to think like a God, not just a human being. I was taught to raise my consciousness into the God zone. And it was given to me by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that word God means the possessor of power and force. So that means within our beings, we have elements, atoms. Now they can make a bomb out that atom that can blow up half the planet. And that's what we are made of, atoms. But we don't know how, we're not aware or conscious that we are made up of atoms. And we're not conscious that atoms are elements of divine order. So the word Islam means peace. That's just one layer of the meaning of peace. Islam also means divine order. For the natural nature of man, and that word man derived from it was at one time meaning mind, you know. Mind is almost spiritual, right? But it has substance to it too. And we were taught by the Supreme Being, Allah in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, that thought travels at 24 billion miles per second. It's traveling, it moves. So if you had the knowledge on how to project thought to another being, you would have no need for telephones. You would have no need for radio, television, because you can summons up your imagination and you see pictures in your mind, in your imagination. When you dream, you see pictures and color. So you could project the element of imagination into somebody else's mind, because your imagination could manifest a material. If you see an airplane in your mind, visualize it in your mind, you had the power to bring it out your mind into another kind of reality, because it's real in your mind. You can manifest what's in your mind into this reality. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or am I too deep for you? See, we don't never think on this level. But the coming of Master Farah Muhammad made us the once slave or uh, victims of war. He came to Detroit already over in the United States for 20 years, but he hadn't came to Detroit. And he came to Detroit in 1930. In his mind was a nation of gods that he had to inform to them who they were so they could escape the wrath that he will bring, the wrath of Armageddon. And because mentally their condition was altered by his enemy. And so the one that could pull it off was here in Hamtramck. His name was Elijah Poole, aka the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And around 1931, they met up, and Elijah Muhammad had the material in him to recognize that he was a supreme being. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad knew who he was. In Detroit. Now he wrote the Supreme Wisdom Lesson book, and on the cover it says to number 1 Michigan. Michigan is surrounded by, I think, 5 Great Lakes, the freshest water in the whole planet. And he used to teach in Black Bottom. Now, most people think the reason why it's called Black Bottom is because of the fact that Black Bottom is where black people that came from down south and whatever, where they congregated at. But they called it Black Bottom because of the richness of the soil. It was black mud. Because that part of Detroit used to be farmland. All this is kind of, when you look back on it and think about how things had came together and how things are coming together, you see how deep this is beginning to make sense to you now. I mean, we're going deep. We're not just surface dwelling. we're going deep. A lot of people that tune in to me, they can't think that deep. They ain't ready to think that deep yet. They got to be punished some more or see more. You know, they don't think things can get worse than what it really is. And to some people, and it ain't really, they're not really feeling the effects of the seventh day in the war of Armageddon, Judgment Day. They're not feeling those effects. You know, so I don't really, people on my video YouTube, I seen how people like to talk in the chat. Some people like to argue about certain things. Some people deny what they see and what they hear due to the fact that that a lot of people are scared to look at reality and truth. Just like the effects of slavery for the black man. They are afraid to look at that because they have latched on to white people, friends with white people. Some of them are falling in love with white people, not realizing that he is our number one enemy. I'm gonna show you when we get to this. I'm gonna go into Detroit. It says here how Detroit went from good to bad to good again. And look how they display this white girl. Detroit is 77% black. At least it was the last time I checked, which was a couple of years ago. It used to be 90 or 88%, almost 90% black. You know. So why, if it's majority, it's 77%, it's still a majority black. Why they showing this? Saying that she, it used to be good, then it went from good to bad. Then they're gonna show her, this white girl, and say it's good again. It's all good. So a lot of y'all can't decipher that, what you see. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words. Y'all can't decipher that. Y'all don't realize the uh, propaganda. And let me be clear about propaganda. Propaganda is neither good or bad. It's just a tool, a marketing tool, or a promotional science promoting what you want to promote. It could be negative or it could be positive. Depends on to who is geared at. This right here is geared to white people. You see what I'm saying? So, but a lot of my people can't recognize when they're being played on. We still are naive. We still are. We're not hip to game. We can't recognize game when we see it. We think a lot of us think we super hip. Just like the when you hear the pimp talk, the word Mac comes from Detroit. On Mac is where all the baddest pimps used to hang out at. So they used to call it Mackin. They didn't call it pimp. They had a guy so ugly they called him Monkey D. So he looked like a monkey. Really like a monkey. But he had some of the baddest hoes, around. They had a whole lot of pimps. I ain't gonna go through all of them. And they would call a, a, a guy to get married and go to work on a job, work a job. They called him a square because they say he gullible. you know. But they the ones that are gullible. I hope a whole lot of Max is tuning into this. Pimps is tuning into this. Cause I used to hang around, the way I was brought up, I had 3 uncles that used to pimp. They were also gangsters on Hastings Street. And growing up in the 60s, 50s and 60s, in Detroit, I had a whole lot of street knowledge, you know. So it ain't no thing with me, until I found out that the biggest pimp was our enemy. The enemy of God, the Caucasian. From a caveman to ruling, the devil made his own world that he's ruling right now. And pimping is part of it. The con game is part of it. Now the pimp, when you study this, you'll see that I'm right. If you get caught pimping, you're gonna go to jail. Now it didn't used to be like that. Back in the Wild Wild West, and even uh, in the East, pimping and whoring wasn't nothing. They would show it on TV. When a cowboy get through uh, playing with the cows and he get paid off, he would go to town. They would go to the saloon. Now we was on the plantation. The black man was on the plantation picking cotton. This wasn't our lifestyle back then. But the slave master, when he had his company come over, they would get a playmate, and she was a black woman, and she had to turn tricks with uh, whoever the slave master say turn tricks with. Sometimes it'd be a girl, a little girl, underage girl. Sometimes it'd be a underage boy. They had special farms for this type of activity, slave farm, sex farms, and we didn't get paid nothing. And the cowboy, well, let's take Dodge City. Who used to hang out in Dodge City? Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday. But they had Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, and his girlfriend was Kitty. She owned the saloon, and she was madam of that saloon called the Long Branch. And Festus and Doc, and Matt Dillon, they were all used to meet up after a hard day work. Sometimes they would gamble in the saloon. But as time went on, and we started coming out the plantation, and America or the United States was industrializing, we moved north or east and north, and they had a red light district. That's the only place that was legal. And brothers started plucking off them white girls, like Jack Johnson, the fighter, famous boxer. He had plucked off a couple of snow bunnies, and they didn't like that. So they made a law called the Mann Act. So they can make up laws anytime they want to, just like they're doing now. They just started it's a law against this and that. That's why Puff Daddy in trouble. Because they still did, but they changed the name to sex trafficking. you know. But the black pimp, if he get caught, he gonna have to do some time. So who's pimping who? See, y'all ain't thinking, man. I had to learn this, as I was coming up as a young man and went through all the hustles it is to go through. I didn't stay long, though. I didn't stay in it, because I really didn't want the white man to be my man. You're not a man and you don't love God if you let someone else rule you. A man don't let nobody punk him out. And you always hear them pimps, you got to be a man first. But you call the man the man. You call the police the man. Oh, here come the man. Now, don't you think your black woman recognize this? This is who she really feared, and this is who she really loved, is the white man. Plus his picture is on that uh on the Benjamins. On all the Benjamins, his picture is on there. So he's promoting this picture on the dollar, the Federal Reserve note. And that's what your woman loved. She loved that dollar because she know that her rent got to be paid for. That's what she think. But if you was to get some backbone, black man and black woman, you wouldn't pay nothing. You would stop paying anything. We prisoners of war first, made slaves. But our Holocaust and enslavement, we lost our names, our education, our culture, the knowledge of God, and everything. Worse than anyone on this planet. Worse than any other group on this planet. Y'all know I'm telling the truth. So the main thing is we lost our backbone. Now, it wasn't no fault of ours, because when you go back and watch Roots, they wanted to call Kunta Kinte Toby. And he said, I'm not Kunta Kinte. Say, no, my name is Kunta Kinte, man. And the dude said, your name is Toby. And then they chopped his foot off. And he said, now what is your name? Kunta said, shit, he might chop off both my feet. My name is Toby. So that's why Master Farad had to come. Those Arabs, they didn't come over here until recently and took over our neighborhoods. Well, like on Hastings Street in Detroit, you go on Warren now, you're going to see Arabs over there. Warren and all over at Eastern Market. Arabs, man. With so-called Islam, but they favor the Caucasian. And you got some black brothers that favor the Caucasian. Here, like all your organizations, Al Sharpton, kissing Biden's butt. Then you got some brothers kissing Trump's butt, looking for them to save them. But they taking from you. They running game on you. And you can't recognize it. That's why the coming of Master Farad Muhammad had to show us the right way to do it. So he used the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to do it. When the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's time was up, he had banks, farms, schools. In his schools, he was teaching the black man who he really was. He was teaching him who his enemy is. He was working on getting the hospital. He was taking over the south side of Chicago. Now, after he gone, look what happened. Look what's happening now. You got migrants over there in Chicago giving those brothers and sisters over there, the blue, we divided. So Master Farad came to Detroit, that made it sacred ground. And there's some strange changes that happened in Detroit. And we're going to get ready to go there now. We're getting ready to go to Detroit. Now I want y'all to watch this. I might break in and show you some things that you should pay attention to recognize game when, you know, when they do it. Now check this out. This is the Elder Black Light, the kind of flavor to savior and the kind of knowledge you won't get in college.
Did you know that when Detroit filed for bankruptcy in 2013, it was the largest city bankruptcy filing by debt ever, estimated at a massive $18 to $20 billion? Or that in the 1950s, Detroit was the richest city in the US and maybe even the world, according to some people. Based on this, it probably won't surprise you to learn that Detroit...
Now, the bankrupt part, don't forget that we had Mayor Coleman Young. We was booming when Mayor Coleman Young took over. But right after he was mayor for 20 years. And he was giving the helping hand to the local brothers and sisters, you know. And the bourgeois, Boulay brothers and sisters, the one that really put us into bankruptcy. Because they didn't know how to fight the white man. But Mayor Young knew how to fight the white man. And he became the mayor of Detroit right after the riots. So let's get back.
It has faced a lot of challenges over the years, from the collapse of its automotive industry during the 2008 financial crisis to the city's own bankruptcy filings in 2013. However, despite these negative events, Detroit wasn't always a place of hardships, and in fact, during its early years, Detroit was one of America's most promising cities. What might be even more surprising is that recent events even suggest that things might be looking up for the city today. But what's the cause of all the ups and downs Detroit has faced over the years? Well, today on Across the Globe, we're going to be looking at how Detroit went from good to bad to good again. Part 1. Detroit's early years and initial rise. While Detroit was technically founded all the way back in 1701, due largely to its strategic location near the Great Lakes, it wasn't until the late 1800s that the city really started to take off. While due to multiple factors, this success was largely driven by an industrial boom with, for instance, the Eureka Iron Works factory being developed in 1864, which laid the groundwork for Detroit's future in manufacturing. During this time, the city's population grew from 45,619 in 1860 to 285,704 by 1900, reflecting its status as a prominent industrial hub. At the time, Detroit was viewed as an important city both nationally and globally, even earning the nickname the Little Paris of the Midwest due to its French roots, prominent architecture, and thriving cultural.
Now, the Little Paris of the Midwest, European style. They still had ties with Europe. You see? And the brothers at that time hadn't came up. But let's continue.
But it was during the early 20th century that Detroit's success really took off and marked the beginning of Detroit's golden era, due largely to explosive growth in its automotive industry. As you probably know, Henry Ford established the Ford Motor Company in Detroit, whose Rouge River Industrial Complex quickly became the largest integrated factory in the world by 1932, with over 100,000 workers and 120 miles of conveyor belts in its massive factory. This was largely due to Ford's implementation of the assembly line, which significantly lowered the cost of production and, in turn, made automobiles accessible to the American middle class. In addition to Ford, Detroit was also home to two other major car manufacturers, Chrysler and General Motors, or GM. Together, these companies were known as the Big Three and were huge players in the US and global car markets. The success brought about by Detroit's automotive industry resulted in significant social and economic impacts for the city. Detroit became a symbol of the American dream, as it offered solid employment opportunities and a high standard of living. Meanwhile, its population quickly growing, Detroit started to make key advancements in public infrastructure and services. For instance, public schools, libraries, and healthcare facilities were constructed, along with numerous cultural attractions, like the Detroit Institute of Arts and the Detroit Public Library. By the year 1930, Detroit's population had soared to over 1.5 million, making it the fourth largest city in the United States. This population boom was driven not only by European immigrants looking for work opportunities in Detroit's factories, but also by Black migrants from the South seeking better economic opportunities during the Great Migration.
Now dig this. You're going to call them migrants. They put a different connotation on freed slaves. This is where they my father, he worked out at Chrysler. They changed the name to Stellantis. And my father told me that they didn't want the brothers in the union. But Henry Ford, I told you this yesterday in my video, a white man told me that Henry Ford had a factory on Woodward. That was his first factory on Woodward in Detroit. And he wanted to educate the black man with technical training. And he wanted to set up classrooms in the factory. But he had static from the Jews. The Jews gave him static. About educating the black people. So this prompted Henry Ford to write a book called The International Jew. You see? And he mentioned about the protocols of Zion, the learned elders of Zion, in his book. And the Jews gave him hell. So let us continue.
Which describes the movement of Black Americans from the South to the North, West, and Midwest between 1910 and 1970. By the time 1950 rolled around, Detroit had reached what many would consider its peak. as it was the wealthiest city in the country, having the highest GDP per capita. Despite Detroit's early success, however, its industrialization and demographic changes also brought challenges. The city's reliance on the automotive industry made it especially vulnerable to economic downturns like the Great Depression. Additionally, the influx of migrants and immigrants led to social tensions, particularly racial conflict.
Now what they want to say is the downfall of Detroit. My father said that they wouldn't let the brothers join the union. The white guys didn't want them in the union. They had riots on them joining the union. See? So it started looking like more blacks because the white man, he didn't want to be around them. So he started moving away. Let's continue.
That would become more pronounced in the latter part of the 20th century. Part 2, Detroit's downfall, suburbanization and white flight. Following World War II, Detroit saw a significant shift in its demographics take place. Specifically, during this time, many of Detroit's white residents began moving to the suburbs, a phenomenon known as white flight. This exodus was fueled by several factors, including the availability of affordable automobiles, as we saw earlier, suburban development, and a trend towards suburbanization and the construction of interstate highways that better allowed for commuting from the suburbs to the city. However, also during this time, discriminatory practices.
Now, they ain't mentioning they had 2 riots on the east side, in the 40s. They ain't mentioning that. They had 2 riots, race riots, uh, in the 40s. See, and the over there in Hamtramck and East Detroit, and stuff like that. The brothers, by them working in the factories, they could afford those houses. So they ain't saying it like it really is. But he said it was white flight. Because Detroit brothers don't take. They ain't going they got good jobs, man, and living good. They just came from picking cotton and whatever. They ain't gonna let mess with that. So we got to start getting gangster too now. Let's go forth.
Like redlining, which denied mortgages to minority buyers in white neighborhoods, led to issues within the city of Detroit itself, in that it saw increasing segregation. As white families continued to leave the city, Detroit's tax base began to erode, leading to a decline in public services.
See, they doing that on purpose. They doing it on purpose, They before we had the riots, 67 riots, the police started going on a nut, shooting niggas, killing niggas. When we started, uh, they said my uncle knocked a white police out his shoes. My uncle he didn't take no stuff. You know. So Let's get back to it.
And further accelerating this outward migration. By the 1960s, the city's population had begun to decline, and the racial composition of Detroit was shifting rapidly. Tensions exploded in July 1967 when Detroit experienced one of the largest urban riots of that time, further accelerating the city's decline. Sparked by a police raid on an unlicensed bar, the riot quickly turned into a full-blown uprising against systemic racism and police brutality. Over the course of 5 days, Detroit witnessed huge amounts of violence and destruction, with 43 people killed, almost 1,200 injured, and over 7,200 arrested. The rioting also resulted in large amounts of property damage, including nearly 1,400 buildings burned or destroyed. Combined with the white flight that was already happening at the time and Detroit's history of discrimination against minorities, the race riots further led to Detroit's image of a city in decline. Deindustrialization and economic decline. In addition to Detroit's social issues, the city soon started facing economic issues as well. While, as we saw earlier, the city's rapid growth was founded upon industrialization, things took a turn for the worse when the process of deindustrialization began in the 1960s. This period marked the beginning of a long, gradual decline for Detroit as it completely changed the city's economy and eventually contributed to its bankruptcy. Deindustrialization started happening as the world became increasingly globalized. As a result, the big three car manufacturers started facing significant competition from abroad, especially from Japan and Europe, who were able to produce cars more cheaply due to lower labor costs and more efficient production methods. In response, American automakers, including the big three, began shifting their production facilities abroad and to other regions within the United States where it was more affordable to manufacture. The impact of these shifts on Detroit was huge. The city's manufacturing, which had been the foundation of its economy for decades, began to crumble. As factories closed or moved away, unemployment rates soared and crime began to rise. As the manufacturing jobs that had once provided a stable middle class for many of Detroit's residents disappeared, the city's tax base eroded even further. This financial strain made it increasingly difficult for the city to maintain its public services and infrastructure. And despite efforts to diversify its economy, by the end of the 20th century, Detroit was grappling with some pretty serious problems. 2008 financial crisis. While Detroit was in a troubled spot by the end of the 20th century, things didn't get better for it when the early 2000s rolled around. Things got much worse, particularly for the automotive industry. There were several key factors that led to trouble for the big three. First, the automotive industry was hit hard by the 2003 to 2008 oil crisis, which led to a significant increase in fuel prices. This, in turn, made the relatively fuel-inefficient car models produced by the big three less attractive to consumers, who were increasingly turning to more fuel-efficient vehicles offered by foreign producers. The situation was made even worse by the 2008 financial crisis, as this led to a big decline in consumer spending and tightened credit markets, making it difficult for consumers to finance new cars. As a result, the big three soon found themselves with an even greater decline in sales. By the time late 2008 rolled around, the big three's financial situations were in pretty bad shape. Chrysler and General Motors were facing bankruptcy, which would eventually lead to massive job losses. In response to these manufacturers' impending bankruptcies, the U.S. government intervened with a bailout plan. Ultimately, though, Chrysler and General Motors could not avoid bankruptcy.
Now, this is around the time that Obama became president, or was getting ready to become president, or was president.
Altogether. Chrysler filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in May of 2009, followed by General Motors a month later. As you can imagine, the bankruptcy of Chrysler and General Motors had a hugely negative impact on Detroit, making things much worse for a city that was already struggling with decades of industrial decline and population loss. The automotive industry had long been the backbone of Detroit's economy, and the bankruptcies led to significant job losses not only directly within Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors, but also across the automotive industry's network of suppliers and associated businesses.
Now, what do you notice about that? The citizens, the labor force, couldn't get no bailouts. That's backwards. We should have been the one that got the bailout. Man, y'all got to wake up, man. Recognize game when you see it. The white man's philosophy is when you see a sucker, bump his head. And he been bumping our head every day.
The unemployment rate in Detroit surged during this time, and Detroit's tax base eroded even further as people lost their jobs and homes. Over the course of the next few years, Detroit's population dropped dramatically, seeing a 25% decline between 2000 and 2011, which totaled a loss of over 713,000 residents. As we'll see shortly, this ended up causing even more problems for the city, as in order to be financially stable, the city of Detroit relied on a tax base of about 750,000 people at a minimum. Detroit's bankruptcy in 2013. If you think the bankruptcy of Detroit's largest car manufacturer sounds bad, things unfortunately still got worse for the city. Confronted with years of a declining population and tax revenues alongside the auto industry's collapse, Detroit found itself unable to cope any longer. In 2013, the city of Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, which was the largest city bankruptcy filing in U.S. history by the amount of debt. Ultimately, this filing showed that the city was unable to meet its financial obligations and marked a new low point in Detroit's history. As you can imagine, the residents of Detroit were significantly affected by both the auto industry's collapse and Detroit's bankruptcy filings. Communities were disrupted by job losses and house foreclosures, with even schools facing budget cuts and closures. To make matters worse, Detroit's status as a city in decline made it harder than ever to attract new investments, businesses, and residents. Crime. As Detroit saw its financial troubles continue to mount, its levels of crime started to rise as well, and Detroit would soon be known as one of the most dangerous and crime-filled cities in the U.S. In the 1980s, Detroit frequently had some of the highest homicide rates in the nation. This was made worse by huge amounts of corruption in its police department, further contributing to issues with crime. While crime decreased after its peak in the 1980s, it still remained a major issue.
See, Mayor Young had made it so that the police had to be 50% black, and you had to stay in the hood. You had to stay in Detroit.
For the city. For example, in 2006, the violent crime rate in Detroit was at a whopping 2,419 incidents per 100,000 people, compared to 564 per 100,000 elsewhere in Michigan, and 479 per 100,000 in the rest of the U.S. While that rate dropped slightly in subsequent years, it still has remained over 4.5 times the national average crime rate, and as you can imagine, this has further led to Detroit's decline as a city. Part 3. Detroit's comeback. So where does Detroit stand today? Well, after decades of economic decline, Detroit is surprisingly showing signs of experiencing a revival, as seen in the city's decreasing crime and violence, new developments, amenities, and young professionals seeking opportunities there. One of the most visible signs of Detroit's comeback is the transformation of its downtown area. Once a ghost town after business hours, present-day downtown Detroit is seeing far more signs of life. For instance, the opening of Little Caesars Arena in 2017, home to the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Pistons, kick-started development in the area. Additionally, the District Detroit, a massive 50-block development, has brought new residential, retail, and entertainment options to the heart of the city. In addition to its downtown area, neighborhoods like Midtown and Porktown have also seen revitalization. Midtown, where large institutions like Wayne State University and the Detroit Medical Center are located, has become a new hotspot for young professionals and entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, Porktown, which is one of Detroit's oldest surviving neighborhoods, has transformed into a hub of activity following the opening of new restaurants, breweries, and residential developments. The city's comeback has also been fueled by a growing startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem. Organizations like TechTown and the Detroit Entrepreneurship Network have provided resources and support for entrepreneurs, helping to foster a thriving startup community. So much so that Detroit was recently named a top emerging startup ecosystem. Detroit's resurgence has also caught the attention of major corporations and organizations. In 2022, for instance, Forbes chose to host its prestigious 30 Under 30 Summit in Detroit, recognizing the city's potential and attractiveness to young entrepreneurs. Another positive for Detroit is that its levels of crime have decreased in recent years. In 2023, for instance, Detroit saw the lowest homicide levels in 57 years, along with significant declines in shootings and carjackings. Specifically, the number of homicides dropped 18.4% between 2022 and 2023. The number of non-fatal shootings, 15.8%, and the number of carjackings, 33.5%. This decline in crime has been attributed to a number of factors, including a huge collaboration effort among federal, state, and local government and community agencies. While challenges remain, including the need to address the city's high poverty rates, improve education, and eliminate racial and ethnic disparities, Detroit does show promising signs of making a comeback. As more people and businesses are drawn to Detroit's community, the city's future looks brighter than it has in decades. What about what happened to Oakland, California?
Yeah, so what we have here is propaganda, and the black man failed to, when he had the opportunity to take over leadership positions. When the white man took his money out the city, and went to Florida, California, Barry Gordy went to California. He left the city and went to California. And all the black businesses we had Barton Cable Vision, we had a bunch of black hospitals. We had the first black national broadcasting company, WGPR, and Channel 62 was took over by CBS. So the Arabs moved in where the Jews used to be at, running things. The Arabs moved in, started running things, running all the gas stations. All this is strategically planned out because we can't take leadership, we can't unite. You got too many boulets at the top negotiating for the average black man and woman. Boulé and bourgeois. And all who you think is down for black people ain't. Right now, that's what's happening. You know, we can't run a nation. We can't even run our own neighborhoods. We're not mentally equipped. We're not mentally equipped for this. So let us tell you what this sister right here is trying to get the neighborhoods together. Let's see how she working her show. Then we're gonna shut it down for the day.
There is an abundance of vacant land in the city of Detroit, and we are in a unique position in the city that many of the lots are owned by the city's land bank. Residents do have access to acquiring that property and actually transforming it and creating beauty in our own neighborhoods and beautify our communities. My name is Tanya Stevens. I am the founder and executive director of Detroit Vacant Land CDC. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to the preservation, beautification, and activation of vacant land in the city of Detroit. Detroit Land Lab is a
Now we're gonna continue this tomorrow. Uh, this is gonna give you a key on how to start taking control of things. This is gonna be our main focus. Uh, Tomorrow we're gonna come in. I encourage you to watch it, and I'm gonna give you a key on how we could a key to how we could turn things around. Networking before they start, before they shut me down, and before they start uh, censoring YouTube and other platforms, we're going to try to unite at a long distance. Uh, every time you meet up in a building or be mass gatherings, it'll always be the enemy there to start confusion. Doing it like this on YouTube, brothers say, no, you need to be in boots on the ground. Yeah, but you're being followed by the FBI and the CIA. The only way they can disrupt this is by, the way we're doing it now. Because I didn't monetize my channel. So the only way they could disrupt it is to shut my whole channel down. And then you'll know that I must be on to something if they do it. If they shut my channel down, you know, I must be on to something. Then you got to pick up the flag and continue it on. See, not everybody got to be their own leader. You got to be your own boss. You got to be the boss of your block You got to have research, networking. So we're going to get into it, how to do it tomorrow. So I'm Black Light. I just want to say this before I go. My word is my bond. I will give my life before my word shall fail. I am an FOI soldier in the Nation of Islam. My duty is to unite my people, Black people, and to protect the women and children of my nation. Now you see how over there in Gaza, how the Palestinians and those people depend on other people to have sympathy on them and to protect them. And they ain't getting no help. And getting slaughtered, women and children getting murdered. They can't protect, the men can't protect this woman and his children. Now over here, it's the same thing. You may have a gun or, weapons and stuff, but you don't make weapons. You don't make the bullets. So you got to use another type of strategy to protect the women and your children. What strategy is that?